Good afternoon. This is the Audits Government Efficiency Committee meeting for September 11th, and it is 2:06. I'm Councilmember Zine, the chair. Two other colleagues, Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. Labange. Any word on them? Seeing none, we will proceed. We have 4 items on the agenda. Start with number 1, please.
Item number 1, continued from August 28th, 2012. Controller reports relative to the performance audit of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power's purchasing card program.
Take it away.
Good afternoon. I'm Siri Kulsa from the Audit Division of the Controller's Office.
You're like the boss or something, but you never speak. Well, we think you are.
At the request of the Department of Water and Power, the Controller conducted this audit.
At the request of the
At the
Department of Water?
request.
Was Yancey involved in that request? All right. That's probably was made then, probably.
The Controller hired one of our master agreement firms, Schoberg Eveshink Consulting, to
Which one
conduct
is
the
that?
performance audit.
That's a mouthful. Which one is that?
Schoberg Eveshink Consulting
Okay. All right.
to conduct the performance audit, and George Skiles is here to present an overview.
You're with that company?
I am.
Okay. Take it away.
All right. Thank you and good afternoon. Like Siri mentioned, my name is George Skiles, audit manager with Schoberg Eveshink Consulting, and I oversaw and conducted this performance audit of DWP's purchasing card program. The audit work was conducted between January, June 2011, and the report was issued November 2011. The primary objectives of this audit were to assess the effectiveness, or whether effective processes were in place to ensure compliance with DWP's internal P-card policies, as well as to determine whether existing controls reasonably minimize the risk of fraudulent, inappropriate, or abusive transactions as part of a P-card program. Before I start the presentation today, going over the report, I would like to thank the department, express appreciation for their time and effort during this review. Audits are never easy, but they viewed this audit as an opportunity for improvement. As we mentioned, they asked for this audit, and they were open and constructive throughout the process. We, as auditors, don't always find that. We do appreciate it. During this presentation, I'll cover 3 overarching themes that were discussed in the report. The report does highlight a lot of best practices, a lot of opportunities for improvement, but essentially 3 themes that we wanted to highlight. First is that DWP had implemented in the past and during the course of audit field work, they were implementing several best practices that we identified in our review of best practices, peer reviews, and so forth. So they were proactive in that respect. We also found that the roles and responsibilities of those participants in the program needed refocusing. The third is that the P-card administrator's office, with approximately 1.3 FTEs in the office with 2 individuals, needed additional resources or tools to monitor and mitigate the risks inherent in a P-card program. Before addressing these 3 themes in more detail, I'd like to provide a little bit of background in terms of the department's purchasing card program. The intent of any P-card program is essentially to expedite and simplify the procurement process, particularly for small dollar frequent purchases. This is essentially done by delegating purchasing authority from management or purchasing department to the end user, to line level staff often. In essence, this eliminates many of the preventive controls in place in a purchasing process and relies heavily on monitoring and controls after the fact to detect whether something inappropriate had happened. During the scope of the audit, DWP had issued as many as 900 purchasing cards to its employees and had executed between $24 million and $18 million in P-card transactions in 2009 and 2010. This brings me to the first theme of the report, that DWP had been proactive in implementing many best practices. Some of these include requiring multiple layers of review, supervisors and managers reviewing the transactions of their employees. They prohibited the use of purchasing cards with certain types of vendors. They prohibited the use of cards to buy certain kinds of goods and services. They required prior approval for purchasing sensitive items such as IT equipment. They began to, during the course of the review and prior, began to increase the role of managers in reviewing transactions and reduce the number of cards from, like I mentioned, over 900 to about 680 by the time we conducted our audit, thereby reducing the risk of the program. And other best practices are discussed further on pages 11 and 12. The second theme we present in the report is that the roles and responsibilities of supervisors, managers, P-card coordinators, and the administrator needed to be refocused. First, we'll highlight two examples of this. Really, the first one is the most important. While supervisors and managers reviewed P-card transactions, the primary role, the primary responsibility for identifying inappropriate transactions that may have violated P-card policy, was really that of the P-card coordinators and the P-card administrator. We found this to be problematic in two respects. The first, the administrator's office, the head of the program, doesn't have any authority or responsibility for the activities of employees throughout the department. Really, supervisors and managers have that responsibility. So the administrator is restricted in being able to direct a P-card holder or to require corrective action. The second, I think more importantly, is that the sheer volume of transactions, the volume of card holders, the volume of transactions. In 2010, primary year that we reviewed, there were 35,000 transactions. That is quite a bit for a single individual or a staff of two that are working part-time on the program to provide a great deal of monitoring for. And so what we found is that while it was their primary responsibility for identifying policy violations, they may not have identified violations, or certainly not in a timely manner. And so what was happening is that policy violations, inappropriate purchases were not being conveyed to the supervisors and managers in a timely manner. It might be 9 months later, quite a bit of time. So corrective action was not quick. And then second, we found that roles and responsibilities between some of these individuals need to be further segregated. In some cases, we had coordinators who, again, their responsibilities to identify policy violations, reviewing the P-card transactions of, in some cases, their boss. And that places a coordinator in a difficult position to identify inappropriate transactions and to notify other department personnel of transactions of their supervisors. And then the second, we found that some coordinators were also card holders themselves. And again, they're responsible for identifying policy violations, but in some respects, they're reviewing their own transactions. And then the third theme discussed in the reports of the volume of card holders and P-card transactions requires additional tools for monitoring. The process employed currently, or at the time of the audit, by DWP meant that a card holder would submit a package of documents with their transactions. It would go to their supervisor. It would be reviewed by their supervisor, their manager, and the coordinator, and sometimes the administrator. So one package is essentially reviewed up to 4 times. What we found is that while the correct individuals are involved, supervisors and managers should certainly be involved, the process was redundant and not focused on the higher risk transactions. And over the past several years, data analytics primarily has really been developed in these kinds of programs to test transactions and to really narrow the focus and the scope of transactions that actually do require the administrator's attention. I think this would be a much more efficient process than the current, or the process at the time, which was to review many of the same documents up to 4 times. Based on this, we made approximately 30 recommendations, many of which focused on best practices that the department should consider. And I think we've received their responses, and they're in progress in many of those areas. With that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
And this came about, the audit was requested after it was discovered that 2 employees were involved, $3 million over 6 years in theft. What happened to those 2 employees?
I'd have to defer to the department on that.
Department?
I do not know.
Yancey?
Good afternoon, Councilmember. I am Gwen Williams. I've been the head of Supply Chain Services since July 9th of this year. It's my understanding, and Winifred might help me out with this, but I do believe that one of the employees was prosecuted criminally and I believe is incarcerated, and one of the other employees, I believe, left the country.
Were they prosecuted?
He fled the
Is there
country.
a warrant for that person's arrest? We need to find that out, because if you steal $3 million, that's a lot of money. Did we go for restitution for on these people?
I believe so, on the individual that
Because the other
He's
ones just took
incarcerated.
off, they had a pension, they had something, I am sure,
I don't know that they...
because they said it was happening over 6 years where they stole, and then once the department discovered this, then they requested the audit, and the audits come up with recommendations to make it better.
Right.
So if you have two folks that steal, that we found out stole more than $3 million, which is a tremendous amount of money to steal, how many years did those employees have in service to Water and Power?
Wendy, Nancy, Water and Power, both of them had in excess of 10, 20 years of service.
In excess of 10 to 20? So they were veteran employees?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's what prompted the audit, and then the audit came up with recommendations, and looking at the expenditures over the years, some of these expenditures are in the range of millions of dollars, and I saw here in the report, some of these expenditures in previous years were absolutely, let me see, I saw that in reviewing this report, $18 million or $14 million.
Right, in 2010, it was 18 million. In 2009, I believe it was 24 million.
24 million on P
And
card.
the number, yes, in P card transactions, the number began to decline, as you can see in the table. I don't remember what page it's on. Shortly
I saw
after,
that, I saw that.
shortly after this had been discovered. So
So-
when employees do get in trouble, that does provide some deterrent.
So if you have two employees, but you had hundreds of cards out there, and I'm not accusing anyone, but did we ever think or find that anyone else was involved in any type of the criminal activity?
We tested transactions and we reviewed transactions for potentially fraudulent or inappropriate transactions. We certainly did. And if we had found fraudulent or abusive transactions, we would have reported on it. We did not.
So it looks like it was limited to these two individuals.
Based on our review in 2010 transactions, yes. What occurred prior to that, we can't attest.
And then what has the department done? Obviously, something's got to be done to make sure this does not recur. What has the department implemented? Because it shows that some are in progress, and not yet implemented on the recommendations from the auditors. So when we look at that, how many are still outstanding that haven't been implemented? Modifications and changes?
Well, we're in process with most of them. A great deal of them are related to pushing down accountability for reviewing the transactions to the supervisors and managers, and as indicated on the report, that manual will be released on September the 14th in draft form for review. When I came on board on July the 9th, they had been making some progress toward getting things done. I decided that I wanted a lot of changes made.
Are you in charge of this mess now?
Yes, I'm in charge of supply chain services, so I have all of purchasing and storehouses and supplier diversity. And one of the things, for instance, they were looking at only using U.S. Bank for data analytics. I immediately, I guess about 6 weeks ago, sent the staff over to the MTA to take a look at the administration of their P-card program. And they use a data analytics software program entitled ACL, and I decided that that was much more robust. It provides us with a lot more information, probably 50 times more information than U.S. Bank would. So we are in the process of purchasing that software. The staff also went over to Metro and saw how they utilize the software. and we'll be implementing it by October the 15th.
And you have a background of making sure people are being honest?
Yes, I do.
Were you a cop?
Almost. I was an executive officer in charge of procurement for a year at the MTA. I left there and went on my own, and I actually conducted some performance audits for the city controller.
Okay.
Previously, I audited the Owens Lake project.
Owens Lake,
Yes,
that's where the dust is.
yes,
That's where we spent $1 billion trying to
Absolutely.
trap the dust.
yes. That's where the
dust
dust is
Dust doesn't go
less
away.
dust.
Okay, well, it looks like we learned from this, but what troubles me, and I've been with the city 43 years, 33 with LAPD, and then the rest as a council member, is that veteran employees think they're going to get away with something. We had the problem with building and safety where employees, building inspectors were on the take, situation at the Coliseum Commission where cash was walking out the back door, and Water and Power, which has the highest salaries and highest pension of all municipal employees in the city of Los Angeles. Yancy, why are you rolling your eyes like that? That was an accurate statement. The highest salaries and highest benefits. Yancy, you know that. So it troubles me that someone gets in a position, public trust, you're working for the people through government, and then they're ripping off. And then we come up with a recommendation, and the ratepayer advocate says, yeah, we're going to increase the water and power rates. And the public says, you know, you're going to increase my rates, and people are stealing who are already receiving compensation. And it really slaps the public in the face. So the one that's on the run, hopefully, though, I worked a fugitive warrant with LAPD. If we find out where the person is, I'll be happy to arrest them. We can bring them before the audit committee for sentencing.
I'll keep you advised.
That would be pretty, how they like that, Paul? So so the recommendation, obviously, and we got a new person in here watching to make sure it's done right, and the supervisors that have to approve, when someone wants to purchase, I mean, 18 million, 25, it's a tremendous amount of money for purchasing. Is there a protocol and a limit on the dollar value when they want to purchase something on a P card?
Yes, there is a spend limit, depending on where they are working and what their requirements are. And we monitor that spend limit. For instance, right now we're looking at what the last 6 months of spend has been. And we have people who've spent no money, and we're going to suspend their cards because they've had no activity, so it lowers the risk. I mean, they don't need to have a card if they're not spending any money. We'll be able to reactivate that card if they can justify in the future that they need it without them having to go through a complete application process. One of the things that when I got the report recently, I looked at the top 3 spenders and asked them to do an audit to make sure that they were in compliance with the policies and procedures.
And obviously, if they need equipment to do the job, we understand that. But, I mean, you can go shopping around, and sometimes you can shop at, especially on a P card, if you're shopping at Costco, which is probably less than Neiman Marcus Nordstrom, you know, do we look at where they're purchasing these
We
products?
look at where they're purchasing. There are merchant codes on the card. They're only allowed to shop for certain things.
Okay.
On the card. They can't buy meals on the card, for instance. They can't get hotels on the card unless they've requested an exception. We have some people that are way up in the northern part of the state or in Idaho, and they're maybe in an area where there are no hotels that want to deal with our contracts. And so on an exception basis, we do allow them to charge those items.
I know we've got folks spread throughout the state, other states, because of the power grid and the water that has to come down to serve the people of Los Angeles. So DOP and controller, how many P cards do they have now on the water side and the power side?
Currently, we've increased the number. I don't have them split out by water and power, but we had gone down to 680. We're back up to more than 900. Part of that is because about 250 of that 900 are for fuel cards. We were piggybacking on the Vanguard program with the city. That contract has not yet been renewed, and so in order to provide our employees who have a real need, they're not close by to our filling stations at the warehouses, we've allowed them to use the P cards temporarily till that contract is back in place.
Then do we audit that to see if they're getting full service, or they're getting self-service, and they're getting car washes, and they're actually doing more spending than they should?
Actually, I really can't speak to that, to tell you the truth, but I do believe so. For instance, I think they're only allowed to use 87 or 89 octane gas.
Because 87 is obviously cheaper than 89, that's
Right.
91.
Right.
Okay, and then, are there purchase limits on the card? Does each
Yes.
card have a purchase limit? What's that limit?
Well, they have varying limits depending on what they're doing. Some people have a $20,000 per month limit. Some people have a $2,000 per month limit. It depends on,
How much does Yancy get a month?
she doesn't have a card.
That's why she's never taken me to lunch, I understand. And the annual cost with what we have now, is it 1824 or somewhere in that?
It's in that range, yes.
Okay. And we're doing the protocols. Okay, the controller administers the cards. It's that the controller administers the P cards for GSD. Their oversight in the program is pretty good. DOP should have controls in place. Obviously, you're new to the position, so whatever process you can implement would probably be worthwhile, since there's already been an issue with these two folks that were stealing. And to the controller, the best practices, do we have a manual or a process or something? Because we've got harbor, we got airport, they all use P cards. Is there some kind of a manual to say, this is what we should have, like a general rule?
There is a standard manual that's available to all user departments, and I think DWP's internal manual actually follows
Models
those
it.
specific guidelines. It really gets into the specific of who is accountable for what authority levels and oversight, and then, of course, the after-the-fact monitoring. When there's such a tremendous number of transactions, that's where it's really beneficial to have some type of a data mining or ACL or data tool to really be able to focus your resources, because you just physically can't look at everything.
Yeah, we're drowning in paper right now, which is why I recommended the ACL. I mean, it's just, we've got 1.3 FTEs, but we really need 3 if we would continue to use paper, so ACL should help us out a lot.
And then the 33 recommendations on the controller's report, will the department implement all of them eventually?
I think 32 out of the 33, I think on one of them where they'd suggested that we use credit checks or take disciplinary actions of employees into account. We checked with legal, and I don't think the city's able to do credit checks.
Why not?
I don't know.
City attorney here?
Privacy issues.
Well,
I know.
I understand privacy, but when they're using city money, the privacy has a limit. I know we do background checks when people are hired to the city. If someone has filed bankruptcy, you would think that they would not need or have the temptation of a P card. We need to report back on that issue, Paul, regarding if someone's got a P card, there should be a credit check on that individual to make sure that they're not in default. I mean, it's nice temptation to give someone a P card that could be misused. You don't want to tempt someone into something that is not necessary. Like in my office, we've got, I think, 1 P card for fuel, and that's it. And I know that seeing what's happening with the economic situation, a lot of people, hey, this is the easy way to go. And it happens more often than we find out. This, obviously, when the department found out this $3 million over 6 years, they wanted to implement, and they went to the controller and said, do an audit for us. What did the audit cost us, by the way? How much do we pay for the audit?
I can get back to you on that. I think it was roughly around 100.
I think it
85?
might have been around.
I can get back to you.
Yeah, it was less than 100, I do know that.
Okay, minus 100. Did we charge that off to Water and Power?
I believe we did, yes.
We
They
should.
requested the audit.
Yeah, so if a department requests it, then we would necessarily charge it back to that department, which obviously is the way it should be. Because we got the letter from Mr. Nichols, who's the general manager, and I have a lot of respect for him. But, you know, when people commit that violation of law that costs the taxpayers money, obviously there's got to be consequences, and then some type of implementation of procedures where it can't happen again. While there's nothing fail-safe, we have to be as fail-safe as possible, especially when it comes to dollars. Any other recommendations from the audit firm?
No, thank you.
Okay, Controller?
It's good. It's good.
So we will put this in our note and file. It'll be sent to the council, and I'm sure we'll have some discussion there regarding it. And at that time, whatever questions remain, if you could be prepared to answer those, because obviously the council and the committee wants to know that, we've got as fail-safe system as possible, especially when you're up to 900 cards. And then the fuel cards are only used for fuel, when you have
Yes.
just a fuel card.
That's the only category that the card is coded so that they can only charge certain things. So when they have a fuel card,
Okay, so out of the
Only
250 out of the 900, that's only for fuel.
right,
Okay, so say they go to the station, they buy fuel, and then they want to buy snacks, they want to buy soda, they want to buy ice cream, they want to buy food. We need to restrict that,
okay,
because many of these stations where you have the fuel card, they also have the different commodity items you can
Right.
purchase. So
I'll
it needs
check
to
on
be
that.
strictly the fuel and nothing else. They want to buy a Coke, go to McDonald's and get a big Coke for $1, because they got the dollar special. Did you know that, Mr. Auditor?
No, I did not.
You can go to McDonald's and get a big Coke, a small Coke, or a medium-sized Coke, and it's $1.
Yeah.
So when you go there, they ask you what size, take the dollar size, but get the big size because it lasts longer.
I'll have to keep that in mind.
Keep that in mind. I'm a consumer shopper, I know how to spend it, how to save $1. Okay, that'll be the action on that. Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank you.
for number one, and let's go to number two.
Item number 2, controller report relative to fiscal year 2010-11 Municipal Improvement Corporation financial statements and management discussion and analysis.
Mikla. We've seen Mikla all over the place.
Yes.
And here's that famous musical group, Simpson and Simpson.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Rock
Matthias.
stars, Simpson and Simpson, ladies and gentlemen. Live here at City Hall.
Yes.
That'd be a good name for a music group, don't you think?
We already have a TV show, The Simpsons.
Oh, that's right. Didn't they pass away?
No,
Oh, no, that's the character. Oh, okay. I was thinking of somebody else. All right.
Okay, good afternoon. Matthias Farfan with the Office of the Controller. Under the city charter, the city council is responsible for hiring an external auditor to perform independent audits on the city's financial statements and then report on them. Items 2, 3, and 4 are reports from the city's external auditor. Item 2 is the audit in regards to the MICLA financial statements for 10-11. The report's attached to the financial statements there from the external auditor, and Brainerd's here to answer any questions. if you
What's
have
the
any.
city's current rating on the Mikla debt?
I think it was 8+? Is that correct? The CAO's here as well.
Mario Vasquez with the City Administrative Officer. On page 6 of the report does indicate the ratings. On the bottom of page 6, you'll see that there are 3 rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch, and the ratings are A3, A+, and A+.
Good.
and just a note related to the audit. We performed the audit in accordance with the auditing standards promulgated by the American Institute of CPAs, which requires us to test the internal controls, to examine the internal controls, and to develop an audit plan based upon those internal controls. We did that. The result of our audit resulted in an unqualified opinion, a clean opinion. We had no audit issues of noncompliance. There was no audit issues related to the internal controls. If there were any significant internal controls issues, we would have reported them to you as either material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. There weren't.
You're saying Mickle is doing good?
Mickle is doing good, yes.
And number 3, we got 2, 3, and 4. We could probably link those together, because on number 3, we're going to note and file. Number 2. Number 3,
Number 3 requires us to,
sewer construction and maintenance fund.
yes, number 3 requires us, subsequent to the audit, to report back to the governing board with respect to correspondence, reporting to you the results of our audits. And you have included in your package our, what we call SAS 114 letter. And basically, if there were any issues that we felt should be brought to your attention, such as material weaknesses, significant deficiency, or compliance issues, we would have disclosed those in this report to you. There are some basic items we are supposed to disclose which have been disclosed, such as estimates used in the financial statements, and also any corrections that were made by the city as a result of our audit, or any items that we noted was not corrected. Those were included here. There were no significant corrections that were not made, and there were no items that we reported to you other than the areas in the financial statements where there are estimates.
Okay. And let's do number 4.
Number 4 represents our engagement letter for the audit for the period ending June 30 of this year. The engagement letter that we prepared is in line with the engagement letters that are representative by the American Institute of CPAs that suggest that we send to all of our clients, including governmental clients, where we have a contract. So our engagement letter spells out what the responsibilities of the cities are that relate to our audit and what our responsibilities are. And our engagement letter is subordinate to your contract. And we've included that here also.
And in terms of the contract, what is the cost of that contract? Is that an ongoing contract or is that individual for audit?
It's an individual for audit contract. We had a 5-year contract. We had a 3-year contract with 2 option years. This is the final option year. The contract amount is approximately $740,000. It includes the city's CAFR financial statements, the sewer maintenance and construction fund, and MICULA. And the total contract amount is $740,000 for the audit, and there's a $50,000 contingency that brings the contract to about $810,000.
Okay. 740 and 50, you say?
About $740,000,
The
yes.
740 and 50 comes out to 890.
No, I think
Oh, I'm sorry, 790.
Yes.
800,000.
yes, about I think the total is about $800,000. Yes.
And that expires when?
This is the final option year of the contract. Yes.
It would be the final year, and then we'll be coming forward to council in the coming months with a letter requesting authority to release an RFP, so we can go through the process.
There'll be a new controller next July 1st.
Yes.
So would you have a contract before that or after that?
The contract would be in place prior to that. It is our desire to have the contract already executed prior to the proposed budget coming out for the following fiscal year, so we can properly budget the dollar amount.
For how many years would it be?
It would be a 3-year contract with 2 1-year extensions. And as I mentioned before, it's actually the city council is responsible for contracting with the external accounting firm. In the past, the city council has appointed the controller as sort of to coordinate all of that going on. But it's usually the CAO would be part of that selection committee usually, and I think Public Works was also part of the
Yeah, but does
selection.
that cost come out of the controller's budget or does it come out of the council budget?
It comes out of the general city purposes is where it's budgeted, so it's not in the controller's budget.
Okay, so it's not coming out of the controller's budget or the council, but there's another budget.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just looking at down the road when we talk about lack of funds to do things, as they
Yeah.
keep on saying, it's getting more and more desperate.
Yeah.
As the economic situation doesn't get lighter and brighter. Okay, so we can note and file on those 3 reports. I don't see anything else that we have. There's no questions from the folks in attendance here. So I really think that's a good name for a group, Simpson and Simpson.
Yes.
I can get you started in some radio shows.
I'm sorry.
I can get you started in some radio shows.
Yes.
All right, that'll conclude our meeting at 2:40. All right, thank you all very much.